Hey everyone, I'm Wa.
And I'm Chris, and welcome to DocuSweeties.
We're two longtime friends who discuss the riveting and sometimes trashy world of reality TV and docuseries.
Yes, but through our own lens, honey, which can be spicy, bitter. I mean, it can taste weird, it can taste good, but at the end of the day, hopefully mildly sweet. Hi.
Hello.
Yes, babe,
Uh,
we are here to give you something that been sitting on. We've been sitting on, but it's a little weird for us because technically it's not a docuseries, but Juan wanted to watch it.
it's a documentary, which I still feel is in line with what we're doing. So basically, it's Call Me Miss Cleo. It was on HBO. It's on HBO currently, HBO Max, if you have the app or whatever. And it is basically a documentary that gives us a little insight into the phenomenon that is known as Miss Cleo. If you were a teen or a child that was like, and had some kind of discerning brain power between 1997 and 2001, you would absolutely know who Miss Cleo is because
Mhm.
she was the voice and face of the Psychics Something Network, PRN,
Like a creator network.
Psychic Reader Network, which was huge. Hotlines were huge in the 90s. And so this is basically where there would be commercials and or infomercials where psychics would go on and talk to real live callers, tell them about their lives and tell them what's going on, and then you would call the hotline to meet with other psychics of equal caliber. But the reason the reason why that Miss Cleo specifically was so popular was because of the shtick that they gave us. She was a person who was like Caribbean, Jamaican descent, supposedly Jamaican specifically, and always wore African rather attire. And let me just tell you, me and my brother used to literally make fun of it so much because sometimes her accent would be so wild. And as a person whose family is from Caribbean descent, I'm ashamed to say that I didn't clock her accent. I never thought she was faking the accent.
Neither
I
did I.
just thought
Neither did I.
I just thought it was extra. And a reason why it's important is because my family's from the Caribbean, so you think I'd be able to clock an accent, but no. I was like, the way one time she'd be like, "Oh, you know the one over there, the one in a cold sack." And so me and my brother all the time would just go be like, "You know the one in a cold sack," and we would just be so extra with it because it was so wild the way she said cul-de-sac. um,
Yeah, I yes, and you should have gotten it. But I will say that also, yeah, me as a non, uh person from the Caribbean, I also definitely bought it hook, line, and sinker. All white people did. In fact, all white people did. And then a lot of normal American people did. And then definitely people from Jamaica were like, sounds weird. That one sounds weird. So but I will say this. So we're going to open with the players of this documentary, and it's a documentary with people that knew her and then people that are in the public eye that know about pop culture. So we have Raven Simone, we have Deborah Wilson. We will then also have in her life people that knew her pre Miss Cleo, people that worked for the Psychic Reader Network, people that knew her after the Psychic Reader Network. And so it's like, and we have archive footage of course, Miss Cleo herself. So those are kind of where we can bounce in between lawyers and various people like that once we get into the fact that the Psychic Reader Network, spoiler alert, goes through some legal troubles. Wow.
Yeah. So it's funny because they get Raven Simone and Deborah Wilson are the only two celebrities that'll like do this, which is weird. And Raven Simone, through most of it, is given information and it just like talks on it as though she knows, but she doesn't. So she was 12 years old in 1997 when the commercials first started, and she talks about Raven Simone as like, oh, they were unskippable back then. I'm like, bitch, it wasn't that long ago. Calm down. And so we go down a little bit of a rabbit hole with the talk hotlines, and this is kind of brings back to Killer Sally because she had her own little hotline as well.
I
And
loved it. I we talked about this before. Like, I loved the idea of hotlines. I wasn't old enough to use them, but there was like obviously sex hotlines, right? Which now no longer exist because people can just like get porn all the time or whatever, but like there was like call a sexy girl. So there's all the sex lines. Then there's the party lines, which is just supposed to be like, hey, me and Wa are hanging out on a Saturday night. We're bored. Let's call some dudes we don't know by calling in a 800 number and then being patched into what would be a pre-online chat room before you could ASL it, but like it's just where you'd be like, hi, who's there? Hi, I'm Richard. I'm in Diamond Bar. Where are you? You're just like, oh, I'm Chrissy. I'm in, wherever I live. Chrissy, because I'd be like 4 years old at the time. And then of course the psychic stuff. Okay. And like, something that's very interesting about the psychic stuff is the core people that would give money and call a psychic reader network, to me feels like the core people that also would join a cult or any sort of religious cult like that, or would have a spiritual guru. I'm like, oh, it's like deep end. Okay, go on, Wa.
So they like to say that she was different because she had a dynamic energy and she was entertaining and she had the look. So for most Caribbean people, except for me, it was clear that she was appropriating the accent. But they know nothing about her background. And it looks like she decided, like in 2012, to do a documentary called Hotline. And then in that, she says to everyone, hello. Hi, my name is Ure Del Cleo Malay Harris, but I'm formerly known as Miss Cleo. And so, like, she does that. And then she says that she is a trained priestess. And she has many ways to the divine and get their information. She communes with them. She chats with them for those that are on the other side. Then we get like a little talking head of somebody named Mary Lou, who's also Lou Ann, who's somebody who knew her after the Miss Cleo stuff. So as Chris would say, she's a blonde woman with short, like blonde and gray hair and a pink shirt and glasses, sweater, look very wholesome. And she says you could sit with her and she could give you the most insight into your life, and that she was very disciplined in her practice. And then there was somebody by the name of Andy, who was a makeup artist and friend, and says that, Miss Cleo was very, very hurt in life. So what we have is a trend of like her white friends afterwards who are just like talking about all of her ups and downs in life and how intuitive she was, and they did not care. We have this young butch person named Jamie, who was like, she could read you, she could clock you, and she wanted to teach you. And I said, ma'am, if you do not pull back on all of that AAV, like LGBTQ vernacular, she could read you, she could clock you. Okay, RuPaul's Drag Race.
I know.
I was like, ma'am. Woo. So they just like have all these like fond memories of her. Go ahead.
She doesn't have any black friends.
Yeah.
Now listen to the time she ends up like living out her life in Palm Beach, Florida. So Palm Beach makes me feel like there's definitely a lot of Cuban people around there. I mean, but she like really cements herself. Also, I'm not going to talk about another. I will wait to also discuss, yes, another characteristic she has with them that we realize later that maybe also speaks to that. But yeah, there's not going to be a lot of black friends of hers, even though we do get some lovely black people that worked with her.
Yeah.
Well, I'll wait till we get there, I guess.
So we meet her godsons, and her godsons. There's two of them. And they're the children of one of the other talking heads, whose name is Andy or whatever, right? So you're like, oh, she has godchildren, interesting. So then we cut back to the beginning of her life, which is Seattle in the 90s. So not the beginning of her actual life, but just one period in her life. And she joins this thriving black art scene in Seattle, and under the name, they knew her as Ure Perry Harris.
Mm-hmm. Ray. They would call her Ray. Mm-hmm. And basically she was hired. She said that she done a lot of theater and was like theater arts person, and like a theater arts producer, they would hire her to come on with a project. She would write it, and then she'd cast actors, and then they would just give her a lump sum of money and be like, well, here's the money for the production, like pay your actors, or and like also yourself, like from this money. And she just was like, cool.
Yeah.
Bye, like
She wouldn't pay the actors. She
But
didn't pay
she
the
was
actors. She
great.
probably got some sets and pocketed the rest of the money and gave them a list of reasons why she couldn't pay them. Like she had cancer, she needed this and that. So it's like they laughed at her also because she was such a character. So I can only imagine she's like that one theater teacher that's just like kind of kooky and everyone just kind of has impressions of her. And one of the cast members is like, yeah, basically the character Miss Cleo was from a play that she developed. So it's like she would go into the beginnings of Miss Cleo when we would be with her.
She workshopped Miss Cleo at the Seattle 1990s theater, and then just yeah, they just were and then just like bounced, I mean, without paying anyone.
And
And
oh,
so
they also said she never spoke with an accent
oh,
in
yeah.
front of them. So they're like, we don't know, like it's wild to see where she is now because she don't have no accent and nobody knew where she was from. It was like, and I'm like, that is so crazy. I can't go anywhere without people asking me all of my fucking business. So the fact that Miss Cleo was unable to do what she was doing is an actual talent because I can't get away from people who want to know everything about my life.
I mean, all right, well, put on a Jamaican accent, honey. They won't ask one question from you. And listen, like maybe it's good nowadays to like learn how to do a good one and like what the differences are. Did your dad not? So your dad never was like, who's that woman?
No, my dad doesn't. I don't know. My dad didn't watch TV. He
But
doesn't
like,
watch TV.
so when you and your brother were there watching it, who was in the room?
I don't
Not your
know.
dad?
I have to ask him. I'll ask him. I don't. It like he was not. My dad is always. You know how my dad's always outside, Chris.
But like I know he's a honey, but he's not outside. I mean, is he outside during the times in which the commercial will come on? We all know it's late.
My dad is
No.
literally. My dad was either outside or asleep. So like he had like you have to know. My dad is outside from the moment he wakes up until he goes to eat, and then he goes up to his room or goes to his room. Like he's a very man of he's outside the whole time. So I can ask him if he remembers Miss Cleo and if he's like, where do you think she's from? And I'll see what he says. That's what I'll do. Great, good idea. Thank you.
So basically, Miss Cleo gets a job with the hotline, and this would of course in start the situation. Now,
She's
was
behind the camera though when she first starts with them. She's like producing or something.
it's interesting, yes, but she's not a founder of it, which of course is like she's a paid person, like low level person that they end up being like, "Oh, we'll make you the spokesperson."
And she somehow convinces them though. She's the one who is like, "Oh no, this doesn't look right." And then she makes it seem like she didn't want to do it and they forced it on her. But then there's a friend who worked with her behind the camera before she went in front of it who said that she basically convinced them to give her a shot to do it. And then and then they let her do it one time and then they got some like dry, white lady to do it and ratings went down again or calls weren't high and then they put her back again. So it's like she did like one thing from it and convinced them all that she had this intuition. And it really is interesting because, and we can bounce all over the place because we have limited time, but like it really is interesting how some folk in this documentary believe that she had multiple personality disorder.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, some people are like, "Oh yeah, she's psychotic and she created multiple personalities to deal with the fact that she was in traumatic situations and it was her like escape mechanism or like protective mechanism." And then she like just lived in these delusions and that's what you saw. And they'll discuss, I mean, yeah. Wait, I want to know one thing. In the notes, Wah said, "There is a man with locks from the black or white MJ video and went to my church."
Yes. Okay. So it's black, it's white, it's
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. There is one man. Remember the hair, just like the black
Yes.
man with the okay, that man. He went to my church. And when they showed he sat in the front row and he was one of the ones who like when I this man was gay. Okay, there were several gay men who maneuvered around my church. And I thought that they were out and proud because me as like a 12-year-old was like, "Oh, you like men, so do I." And then when like, one of the pastors said something negative about homosexuality, they like clapped. I looked at them because I sat in the front row too. I was real churchy. I was like, "Sir, you're gay." And it was him. And then so he's in one of the infomercials for the Psychic Network. So he's like, "Yeah, I called Miss Cleo and she helped me out a lot." Or not like that, but yeah. So did I take a picture of him? I might have taken a picture of him. I might have taken a picture. I might have. Anyways, go on. Let me
That's
find the
so
picture.
funny. Yeah. So, though also another part of the talking heads of the documentary are the folks that got jobs as psychic readers. And they all have a lot in common, which is basically like, yeah, I was looking for a job in a paper, which is like all LOL. Like, remember, yeah, like this is how old school, like people like opened up papers, like the want ads, honey, and one person's like, I was looking in the Village Voice, like such. And, yeah, they were like, operators wanted, they would go answer an ad, they need some money, and someone would be like, yeah, just like here's the script and just sit in that chair. And there's two ways to do it. There's people that were in-house and there's people that would be at the luxury of their own house and just call in. They never asked if they had psychic abilities. All these people had to do was follow a script. Now we know something. Now we know that they used to advertise that your first read and is free and the first 3 minutes are free. You know what I'm saying? So the goal, but after that, it's like $3.99 a minute. And so it's like you have to keep them on the phone. You got to like keep them on the phone or whatever. There's like things you have to do and you have to ask for their names and addresses. So you can sort of compile a mailing list. So just not even just like during the phone call, but they can like advertise to them later or sell the information or whatever they're going to do. And so there's just a motley crew of people that you would never go to for advice in a billion years,
Yep.
being like, yep, I just would sit there and be like, hey, thanks for calling the psychic red. You're sad and I'm going to make you happy. Money's coming your way. What's your name? Or whatever for 45 minutes, and people would just like rake up hundreds of dollars of bills. Like kids would call, like, and it would just be on your phone bill.
Yeah. And what's crazy about it is that there are two of the women who they interview who were psychic readers, and one of them, her name was Spiritual Julie. So she feels like she was in her calling doing the right thing. And there's another woman who was like surrounded by candles in her confessional, like when she's on talking about Miss Cleo, who like is another person who did the PRN and felt that they were really psychic sort of. But then there's the other gambit where there's this like old lady who's like, yeah, what they were doing was ripping people off. I was one of the psychics and I fought against them. And there was a young a man who said he's gray haired now, but he was very young when he was doing it. And he used to put on a fake accent and pretend to be a Southern belle named Cassandra in order to get people to stay on longer because people believed that accent more than his regular male voice. But he also says it was hard for him to keep it going because he was a chain smoker. So, I mean, it's just like all of these people, like in her mind, she said that she agreed to read cards, as she did at home. And it was for that infomercial. And then it was just no big deal. But then she like goes on this campaign. She's everywhere. She's on Jenny Jones. Remember her? Jenny Jones.
Yeah, Richard Bay. I lived a ball, honey. Yes.
Yeah. So she was on Jenny Jones, and like it's just like she became a superstar, and to the certain extent, I think that did feed her ego 100%. Because if there's anything that woman wants is attention, or to she wants attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. And most actors do want it.
I want it.
Yeah, most actors do want attention. Most creative people do. So she says that she was in the contract to say, call me now. And because she was under contract, she felt bad about it because she knew that they weren't calling her, but it was a part of her contract. When she tried to back out of it, they told her she couldn't.
Call me now for your free reading.
Call me now for your free tarot reading. And so the people who actually picked up the phone were folks that just read from a book and just would say anything. And sometimes they would go pretend to go look for her when the people would ask. And so they would keep them on the phone as long. So while that person was going to go, quote unquote, look for Miss Cleo, they were just racking up minutes. Could you imagine sitting on the phone for 5 minutes, just wasting, $25 on that?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? Let me see if I can find her. Wait, I'm gonna knock on the door. Miss Cleo! Who's there? Oh, wait. By the way, one of La's notes, and I'll kill her for it, says, call me now, Ireland, Chris Farah, because she knows that anytime I try and do this goddamn Miss Cleo accent, it just dives into Irish. I don't know what it is. It's so crazy. It's like the flat sounding vowels really like mess me up or whatever.
But you do know that like a contingency of a part of the Jamaican accent does come from the Irish.
Well, that's probably why I'm so good at it. Anyway, so
but also, who does it? So what they did is they cut to a shot of Shangela, and Shangela was going to do her as a Snatch Game because they were talking about how popular she is in the zeitgeist. And so when Shangela's like, call me now, she says like, call me now, or like whatever in the Irish way. And Rue goes, that sounded kind of Irish. And she's like, so that's what it was. It was Shangela's Chris and Chris is Shangela.
I love Shangela. I love DJ. God bless. That makes me happy. Yeah, like the shots of the people that are doing her as sketches, like Dave Chappelle does her. Now, of course, we've already talked about Deborah Wilson being here. And yeah, you wrote down a very funny thing. They show a funny clip of Deborah Wilson as Miss Cleo. And she says, like, the sketch really wasn't about like making fun of her. Of course, she's a huge ass character, but the difference is what the sketch is about is like the funny readings.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, it's about her. And then Raven says the same thing. So Raven Simone's like, while playing That's So Raven, named after me, but a completely different person and character than me, I did a character where I was a psychic, but actually on the show, I actually was psychic. And it was just so fun for the character Raven to pull from Miss Cleo. I said, bitch, you did your best Miss Cleo accent, or best Miss Cleo in what's that word where you replicate somebody?
Clone?
No, the word where you
Impersonate?
Like you did your best impersonation of her. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm not me. But that you're really doing something good when people start to make fun of you. So it's like they do, like Deborah also, can we just talk about Deborah Wilson for a second? Can we just talk about the last time we actually saw her, and we being me, is that she had more hair and less tattoos. We see her on this thing, and the girl is tatted from the neck, and I can only imagine all the way down. And she also has on earrings, but that are like earrings that she's looped in her. What are those things where the ladies have, like, where people put like the spacers in their ear so they're big? Whatever.
Spacers.
Yeah, so she has, like, instead of her
clogs. No, God,
I can't think of it. Anyways, you know how when you make your earlobes super, super big and spread out? Well, she has those silver earrings she's wearing are just I guess somebody has made a line of earrings for women who have giant earlobe holes. So like that's what she's wearing. And the way she's so intense talking about Miss Cleo as though she knew the woman.
She doesn't. Listen, two women from pop culture were paid to be talking heads on the show, and I think that Raven, as Wah said, was just given a bunch of information. She's like, yeah, I'll say it back to the camera. I'm great. I'm Raven. I've been a host. I'm very good at this kind of, I'm a child actress, honey. Like, I love this shit. Give me a job.
Yeah.
And I think that when Deborah Wilson would talk about her, I was like, oh, she is a fan. I think that there is I think that she is, I think that she is a fan in a way that is like, I'm like a nerdy, like kind of like, okay, you know how I love Angeline?
Mm-hmm.
I think that Miss Cleo is kind of like one of those, like characters that like Deborah Wilson like connects with, like where she's like, it's a weird ass thing where I see that she's this, but also it's because she was X, Y, and Z, and I fucking see it all, like,
yeah.
Okay, so it's hard to, keep things linear, but and so I don't know if we talked about this, but Miss Cleo says that her life was that she was born in Jamaica. Her parents brought her over to America and gave her to a woman to raise her with 10 other kids. Okay. And that she was never really favorited or whatever. And she was always bigger. She's put into a Catholic school. She looks different from everyone else. And it's hard for her. So later on, we will also hear that maybe there was sexual abuse that happened. Now, all of this is vague because nothing is known for a fact. Like, they can't find evidence of really what her life was before. Like, we can't find whether she graduated from the colleges that she said she did or whatever. So it's like, but what exists are these testimonials from people that have spent time with her and her impact. And it's very interesting because the line between someone who is spiritually gifted, who is an activist, or someone who is in pain and trauma and can therefore share her that, or someone who is mentally unstable and truly in a mental disease. I mean, where all that is delineated and who she is, we'll never know.
Yeah, it's so interesting because they have this lady on who's actually Jamaican, and she says in other communities there was such a defense of her, and what this is in her word, her renegotiated identity. And I said that is a really nice way of putting it. It's like Cleo or Ray made a choice that she was going to go down a path, and she got caught up in a thing and she felt like she was in her pocket. Because even when she's being like sued for her with PRN for the way that they scan people out of money, she's still very much like, no, I'm a victim in this. Like, no, she like stays so true to it. And it's like, it's just so interesting that like at this point, I'm like, who cares who Ure Harris is? Miss Cleo is now the person that we are seeing. And that's the person that is needing to be in order for this individual to survive. And that's what Deborah Wilson was saying, was that, you know, this is maybe who she needed to be to survive in the world. And I get that. And I'm like, okay, that's a fair call out. It's like, who cares? You know, yeah, she scanned people out of money. That fucking sucks. But like,
it wasn't her, it was the guys. We'll get into like, so now, I mean, like,
no, I mean the folk in Seattle. She took that money in Seattle. Right. So like, you know, so then there is that, but it's like, even the folk in Seattle, at least one of the ladies was like, you know what? I don't know what it was like to be her. And this thing happened a long time ago. And, you know, if she did help people and people felt a certain way from her, then like, let it be what it is. She could be all of these things rolled into one.
So basically the the district attorney in Florida starts to realize that the Psychic Reader Network has a billion, complaints, and it's in the backyard. And two white dudes own the company, right? And they have a huge network of out of house psychic readers, and of course in-house psychic readers, as well as a calculated campaign of mailing lists and collection agencies going after people for things they didn't get charged for, or maybe their kid called, or whatever it is. It's just like really messy, and it's really it's a very dirty game. Now, the entire time the Psychic Reader Network people have been advertising Miss Cleo, at the end of every commercial is this like for entertainment purposes only siren, which is like their legal way of being like, none of this is real. Like, you can't like sue us being like, I didn't win the lotto, like it's because you're not supposed to take any of this literally. This is like fun and games. This is like smoke and mirrors. But there were actual like problems and like dirtily deeds that they were doing. And so they get sued. And then as they're getting sued in the Florida court, the Florida district attorney is like, to make things interesting, I'm going to go ahead and name Miss Cleo as a defendant in the suit, and I'm going to go talk to her about it. So they do. They name her, and they go talk to her, and they realize that this woman, after looking through her tax returns and everything, because you have to have like discovery. Once you name someone, you can ask to see their records. Right. And so when they named her, they got to see her tax returns and be like, holy shit, like they know how much money the PRN has made, like millions and millions of dollars. And they see how much she made. And it's like, holy shit, it's nothing. It's nada. So they're like, oh, you have nothing to do with this. Obviously, you're not making any money from this. So they take her off the thing. And, of course, all the like angry blonde psychics that like were talking before come on the stand and are like, this sucked. No, we suck. They suck. And they lose, and they have to literally, all they do is have to cancel, I think not even all, but like a lot of the collections that they were getting against people, which is like obviously, and pay $5 million to the SEC, which is nothing. And both those dudes get arrested and then bail out the same day. They're never in jail.
Yeah, and her name is just absolutely run through the mud when it comes to this. So I just want to go back to say that she did go to this private religious school, and that she her friends say that certain things happened to her in order to keep her in line. She says that she was taller than everybody, and she suffered for the way that she looked. And then in her yearbook, girl, she's a Jerry curl. So I'm like, somebody was paying for something, because Jerry curls ain't cheap to keep up. So I'm like, how did you keep up that Jerry curl? Also, her nicknames in high school were Mom, DT, and Whitey. So I want the backstory on all of that. I want the backstory on all of it. So I just want to make a little correction for your story about the lawyers. So what happened is that one of the collection agencies or whomever signed the form Cleo.
Mhm.
So that's how they were able to indict her in this thing, because there was an assumption that she was part of she was the face of this company, but she was probably one of three of the figureheads who got all the money. So everybody's assuming that she's making tons and tons of money. So this district attorney from Florida goes after her, but then the FTC gets involved, and it's the FCT, which is like the Federal Trade Commission. They join, and then they go through her records, and she shows them her tax returns, and he's like, "Oh shoot, you don't." You get paid $80,000 a year or whatever, like some amount that pales into comparison. So they know that she's not a part of this. They realize that her signature has been signed. I mean, has been forged. But the problem is that she has been for years now run through the mud as the face of this. And so the lawyer from like Florida still thinks, well, you knew that it wasn't real, so you have some culpability in it. But I'm like, but what kind, besides just wanting to be famous? Like, she doesn't make any monetarily out of it. So like, what other motivation can you put out there? So anyways, by the time they've done this, they've ruined her and she can't go anywhere. And so she becomes a recluse because of this for like 2 or 3 years. She's like just stays in the house and doesn't do anything, and everybody on TV is like, she should have seen it coming, Miss Cleo. I guess she should have seen it coming. It was like and then even they do a thing where Anderson Cooper is like, call me now, you should have seen it coming. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, you guys need to get better. I mean, literally every single news network, they should actually get some comedians to write their jokes, because at this point it's just like sad what happened at that
Yeah,
part.
I agree. So at this time, though, she's being a recluse. She still has her friend Dee, the hairdresser, and the hairdresser's son. So they're like, we're gonna come. We're just gonna like fucking come and get you, and we're gonna like make you come to our house for like these Sunday suppers, like Sunday dinners. You barbecue, like hang out, and then we start to see like video of her singing karaoke and dancing and just like letting loose, just like having a good time. And then from that, we meet another woman who owned a coffee shop, and we see her like singing and doing stuff at the coffee shop too. Like she's after a while starting to feel better. The coffee shop was like kind of like a hippie vegan LGBT friendly coffee shop in town or whatever, and she just like loved the place. And at that coffee shop, we also get to meet like another male activist in the LGBT community who wanted to create, I think, or bring a pride parade down to Broward County. And she immediately was like, yeah, like I'm gonna like jump on that. I'll do whatever you need to do. Like, let me help you or whatever. And they kind of like get to use her name a little bit as like a little mild celebrity, to like be in parades. So she has two godsons. One is I think the son, and I don't know if both are the sons, but one of her godsons is like, look, I probably knew I was gay when I was like 12, but when I'm like 16, I come out. I just like come out. I talk to my godmother about him as Cleo, and I get it done. Like, and in that moment, she was like, holy fuck, like I've lived my whole life and this 16-year-old boy is going to come out, and if he can do it, I can do it. And so she ends up coming out like through media sources, I think in The Advocate, of being gay. And then suddenly we get to realize that that she had a girlfriend. She had a girlfriend. Her first relationship we meet is an ex-lover who is a transgendered man, female to male. So while in the past life, it was her first girlfriend. But yeah, she had never been out. She just
Yeah, and it's interesting that all of a sudden the documentary kind of switches to a different. It feels like a different tone. It's less about her persona on TV and now her personal life. But I just do want to say that when she was being sued, this is what her lawyer said, because it came down to her credibility and like where she was born, because she claims to be Jamaican. Then they find this birth certificate where she's born to two American parents, and so her lawyer says, when they ask, is she Jamaican? And he's like, she is from Jamaica as much as anyone who has that country or any other country they claim. She speaks with a Jamaican accent and is as much of a Jamaican as anyone who claims that country or culture. What?
yeah, it's
What?
and then Rachel Dolezal claims a culture.
Yeah.
So it's
And
like,
it's just like, It's like it is just absolutely wild. It is absolutely wild. So
Well, you
then
know
now
what?
we
Wait, well, I'm sorry because I know where I jumped, but can I also talk about something that happened during the trial? So we should talk like Miss. We should talk about like Miss Cleo being like a mammy character because it was like very, like why it's also interesting that two white men hired a woman to portray a character in face of their company that would be someone who would instill feelings of nurturing motherliness, safety, security, truthfulness, a world like a groundedness, was like a Miss Cleo character who is like uh, a a a black, like maybe like somewhat bigger lady that dispenses wisdom and is to be incredibly trusted. And the Jamaican accent lends this certain amount of exoticism, this certain amount of like other of differentness that is magical and or voodoo-esque. It was like this character that was created and also exploited in a character archetype that we've done before.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really interesting, which is why they're like, it's so easy for white people to believe that it was true. We have like sound bites from like the friend Jamie, who was like, she was a character on the show, and in real life, she was very sweet and in the exact same. Like, I've never heard her speak without an accent. She's always sounded that way. So to me, she's from Jamaica, and who cares? And then Luann starts talking about her other personalities, that she had this personality named Max that would come out and that was male, and when she needed rest. And then her friend Patty, who was the owner of the shop, would say like then she had this other character called Gramier who would come out, who was an old wise woman and speak with multi-layered type of speech. And the walk was different, and that she was following what the spirits were telling her. One of her godsons is very much more of the gay godson, honestly, is very much more of a realism to acknowledge the fact that Miss Cleo was part of something that was like kind of scammy and terrible.
Mhm.
And then the other godson is like, no, she walks in water. um like this says
Yeah.
like, no, for her it was very real for her. It may have been a character, but like, so what? Someone else says that like, some people would say it's mental health. Like, someone said that when she was 11 years old, a family friend made attempts at her, and then finally one day she was trapped, and that she just grew up in a very like unloving situation. And then we had the journalist who called SC to see if she actually went to SC, who says that she doesn't believe that somebody would just make this up out of nowhere. There obviously had to be some very, very like crazy amount of trauma.
Yeah.
And so then we switch, and they reveal that all of these white people are the folks that she came out to. Every single one of them are a part of her LGBTQ life. And
Lou.
that the
Yeah,
one
Lou.
Luann is her, which is one of the great girlfriends of her life.
The
And we're
greatest love
like,
of your life. Yeah, her love.
this entire time we're just thinking these are friends, but no, these are folks that are like, she came into their lives and changed it irrevocably, and so they're going to stand with her 10 toes down regardless if it's fake or not.
Yeah.
Like, wild.
Her and Lou just like, Lou was a later in life lesbian coming out. But I not in the sense that I think Miss Cleo was. I think that she said she was married before. Like
Yeah,
she
she was married. She was 61 years old from Wisconsin, and she meets Cleo and thought she was super interesting and beautiful and didn't understand why Cleo was at all interested in her. And they just were together for until they weren't. And when she talks about how they broke up, it's like, I don't know. It's like we ended up becoming more like roommates. And then one day she told me that she was moving out. So there's that. But I'm like, that's you.
interesting.
And it could just be because Luann was probably in a marriage that was like that, and so she thought it was normal to like feel like roommates at the end. But I don't know. Cleo was her first girlfriend,
Yeah.
so she's kind of. I'm like, damn, coming out at 61. That's like Jenny. Remember, like Jenny just coming out, like Jenny and Sumit. So it's like, the Seattle person said that she moved through life with a certain amount of heaviness, that she just wasn't able to lift. So it's almost like I'm happy that she had the latter part of her life in the way she had it. It sounded like she got sick and died, but then didn't tell anybody that she was sick.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just like interesting because Anne D, the makeup artist, and whose children are her godchildren, like goes to see her, and she can't even talk. She's like, however far into her cancer situation, she was too far gone before people really realized, like, in her life what was going on, and that, that they all remember her as being a ball of light and love and positivity and support, and that, they loved her.
I wonder if it was, like, really that impossible in this day and age to track down not anyone that's in her family. Like, you have a birth certificate, like, where's her mom and where's her dad? You can't find any siblings? Like, there's this My 23andMe and Ancestry, like, and here's the thing, maybe they can, and that would definitively give an answer, and maybe the part of the documentary or the point is the answer of who she is isn't what she actually is, but the answer of who she is who she decided to be. Which at this point, for whatever purposes, was a woman who felt out of place and other and heavy, or had a heaviness to her, and was vilified in a lot of ways, and maybe had some mental anguish, and she ended up kind of creating a community of people who really didn't know a lot about her, and she could feel safe, I guess.
Yeah, and just be who she was. And I get that to a certain extent. I understand just wanting to, like, be who you are and have nobody question you, and nobody, like, want you to confront things that you don't ever want to confront. You just want to live a life and bring happiness and be happy and be joyful. And so, she says that her friends say that she had a vision of her death, and that she went to it in peace, and she said goodbye to who she needed to say goodbye to, and she died at 51, at 53. I did not realize that she was so young.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. I don't even think I knew that until the very moment. I will say I understand what you're saying, but I feel like in reality, and I feel like for mentally healthy people, not to have, I never want anyone to have anyone toxic around them, but to have people that do truly know who you are, to give you that sense of, like, being grounded and a sounding board. Sometimes it can be very easy to be like, I just want to live in a happy life and surround yourself with, like, yes people, or people that don't know I don't know. So she did what she had to do, like, and that's what people do. But I think from what I gather, we are definitely dealing with someone who had some mental health issues. And I think that, and I think that they were probably also instilled through, like, trauma that she had to deal with, which is very, very sad. And, like, we have a lot of empathy for her. But yeah, I guess now I am just like, oh yeah, like, so wait, we can't just, like, find out who her mom is? I don't get it. We can't just, like, no? Her mom can't find the mom's Instagram? I mean, people on the internet are sleuths, so I'm just, like, can't imagine this documentary. But yeah, it was I wish we had to see more of her, like, acting in Seattle. Like, I'd love to see her acting, like, and doing other things, like other characters. Like, we got to see some shots, and maybe just, like, I feel like we got to see her maybe, like, moving about the space. But wouldn't you have loved to have seen, like, just, I don't know, they didn't record any of the performances? Like,
Yeah, they just kept showing the same movements over and over again, the same footage whenever they talked about the Seattle folk. And I'm just like, then they had the one guy who, like, ran the theater, who knew next to nothing about her. So it was like, sometimes they had people on there who I was like, well, why was this necessary? That journalist who called to see if she went to SC, what was the point of that? Like, the other psychic network people, like, who were saying, what was the point in that? Like, it was just weird. But overall, I thought it was an intriguing documentary, and maybe it was because it was about Miss Cleo, and, like, how things were in those times, and the hotlines, and, like, I mean, folks talking about, I had to pay a $200 phone bill. I'm like, people pay $200 phone bills now just regularly. So, like, it's so different. How funny how money, is different. I don't pay $200, but, like, you
yeah,
got
do we?
people who have, like, family and kids, and, like, that you end up paying $500, $200 a month because your kids have a phone, you have a phone, your husband has a phone. Like, Yeah, it's just like I feel like in the 90s, your parents probably paid $50 for their phone bill, and so to have it be $200 is like astronomical. But it's just
I
interesting.
I can't imagine just, like, being a parent and then just, like, getting a phone bill and be like, "That's really expensive," and then just looking because of course they showed you, and you would just see calls to, like, 900 numbers for, like, 45 minutes, and then just see those 45 times 4 is
Yeah, however much that is, I don't know.
80. Nope. Just, like and it'd be like, "Roger!" I don't know why Roger's the name, but, just like, yeah, God, it's interesting. At one point in this documentary, she says after she came out that she had been approached to do a reality show to find a girlfriend, but that she didn't end up doing it because I don't know, she
she
found a girlfriend or whatever.
she found a girlfriend in real life.
Yeah, and I guess I was like, "Oh, I would have loved to see that." And like, what time was that? Was that, like, during, like, Shot of Love time? Was that would have been, like, Shot of Love with Miss Cleo on VH1? Could that have been in the VH1, like, early or late knots, dating shows? Oh my god. Could you imagine? I would have eaten
It would have been
every
great.
morsel up. Would she have had the accent? Listen, later on, as the documentary goes on, and when she has this one televised interview that they pull from because God bless, we know she died. Her accent during that televised interview is less, is significantly less than like full Miss Cleo. But it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was because she was saying that Miss Cleo was on the TV was more of like they wanted her to go bigger, so she did.
They said, dial it up, honey. And she was like, call the sack.
Call me now. You know,
Cul de
um,
sac. What was you and your brother's favorite line?
cul-de-sac.
What was the first part of it?
The one who live in the cul-de-sac.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, you guys.
That sounds
Thank you.
like Sebastian from Little Mermaid. Okay.
Oh, that was fake too, but it was better. It's funny. You know what's been in my head is for the last like 2 weeks has been like, you know what her father say? I'll tell you what her father say. He said he gonna kill himself a crab. That's what her father say. I'm gonna march myself straight home right now and tell him. And don't you take that look with me, young lady. Maybe we can get that witch to give you back your voice.
Okay. I have heard you at least do that when we were on the road to like, I feel like you've had that in your head for, like, the past 20 years. I mean,
I
like, you're
know.
like,
I
"The
just
past 2 weeks," I'm like,
he's
"That
gonna
earworm lives there, honey."
He's
Like, you
gonna
have
kill
to
himself a crab. That's what her father say.
all
All
of My
right,
Little
guys,
Mermaid
we gotta
happened. No,
go.
I get to talk now about My Little
No,
Mermaid
you
obsession.
you
Shut
said
up.
you had to go.
I know I do have to go, but My Little Mermaid earworms are all, Ursula.
That's
So
my Ursula laugh. Go ahead.
no. Okay. Well, I love you guys so much and thank you guys so much for listening. Listen, here's the thing. If you'd like, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We are at DocuSweeties on Instagram and at DocuSweeties on TikTok and at DocuSweeties1 on Twitter. We also exist in some sort of form where you can see our physical beings. Now that costs money. Why?
That's at patreon.com/DocuSweeties. It's $10 a month on Patreon, patreon.com/DocuSweeties. You would get the visuals of what you are listening to right now. We also go live on the first Monday of every month. And, it's a good time. So if you like to get like very specific content from us, those who are on Patreon get the videos immediately after we finish recording them. And they get to watch at their pleasure. And we want to thank them so much for their patronage of us because it helps us so much to get some of this work done. And
We
that's
should do a live where in Patreon where we will read people. Like we will do live psychic readings of our patrons. Okay, great. Okay, that's what's gonna
cool.
happen. And I already got her approval. You saw that. That's there. That's what's gonna happen. Can't wait.
All right,
We
you guys,
love
we'll talk to
you.
you later. Bye.
Bye.